Okay, I am here with Dr. Jeff Borden. Jeff will be speaking at our 2021 Adult Centered Education online this year. So we're just going to have a little chat today with Jeff, find out what he's been up to and what he's going to speak about at ACE. So maybe Jeff, a little bit of a background. I know many of our teachers in our organization have heard from you before, either at previous ACE or at workshops you've done earlier in the school year. But for those who don't know about you, maybe just a little bit of a bio.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, if I've met you before, it's good to be with you again. Yeah, we spent, gosh, I think it was 9 or 12 hours or something together last fall, which was great.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm Dr. Jeff Borden. I'm a professor of education and of communication. I teach both classes. My original sort of home discipline is in speech communication, human communication, and then my advanced degree, my doctorate, is in education. I'm also the chief academic officer for a company that is Canadian.
Right.
For D2L.
Okay, yeah.
Really pretty fun. So I hear from people saying a boot about every day. So I'm really enjoying that. And
it's not only South Park, you hear that, right?
No. The Canadian niceties, it is not exaggerated. The niceness of Canadians, really, you guys and Australians,
right?
Two people I've ever known. So
right,
it's been
right. But we have better accents. Excellent. Oh, that's great. So just a couple questions for you this afternoon. So I know we're, near the end of April, and it was, a little bit more than a year ago. I remember this, vividly. It was for us over here in British Columbia and Coquitlam. It was I remember a Friday, and that was the last Friday before we went for spring break. And the world changed for many people. It was middle of March. And we did not come back face to face after that spring break due to the pandemic. So my question is, how has the pandemic changed, your instruction as a professor and, sort of your day-to-day sort of teaching and instructional existence, I guess?
Yeah. Well, as with the rest of the world, I got very accustomed to Zoom and Teams and Skype, Hangout. But quite honestly, as I was, I really have two hats. I've always had that sort of professional development consultancy hat, which is really for K through 20 educators. And then there's my professor hat that I wear with my students.
Right.
I had a class that I was supposed to teach face-to-face. I think I've said to your folks before, I've never stopped teaching since my master's in 1996.
Yeah.
I've had a class somewhere, sometime, even in the summers. And this time I was supposed to teach face-to-face at a local community college here, and then I was forced to go online. It's not really a problem for me because I've taught online so much over these 20 plus years. So I was able to transition pretty quickly. But in terms of the keynotes I usually give, the workshops I usually give, the trainings I usually give, those all went online. I delivered 4 8-hour workshops online for the first time in my life. Yeah, that was interesting. We ate lunch together, sitting there on the Zoom, and it was really fascinating seeing both the angst from educators saying, I don't know how to do this. I don't want to do this, really having this forced upon them, to watching sort of that transition take place where they said, okay, I'm willing to try some things. I'm willing to give it a shot, and really trying to latch on to something that they could leverage. I tried really hard to give people shortcuts so that they wouldn't have to learn those really tough lessons, that everybody's got to learn at some point, so they could learn from my mistakes or the mistakes of the research that's out there, in the literature. And some were able to do that. So that was gratifying. But that really changed for me. There were months I didn't leave the house except to go get groceries.
Wow.
And so that's just like everybody, we just had to get used to that. That became the normal for a while.
Right. Definitely. Yeah, a lot of adapting on the fly. Definitely. So with an eye towards our conference next month, it's a 1 day conference online this year. It's Friday, May 21st. And I've had a chance to dialogue with you a little bit, and I do know your title, but for those who will be attending ACE and are looking to your workshop, what can they expect? What will you be speaking on at ACE?
So I'm about as excited to talk with the audience about storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Some people think of it as narrative. Some people call it mythos. If you want to go back to how Aristotle referred to it, my thesis, in my master's program was around narrative. This is something I have really valued and studied for a very long time. Again, those that know me may remember my father is a minister, and he was a big believer in story and storytelling. So I watched it growing up. You know, when I was in those church pews, that was about the only thing that could keep my attention and keep me out of trouble for 10 minutes. But I really have come to appreciate and value the arc plot, is what it's typically referred to as. Mm-hmm. In our society, we don't have people who are very good storytellers because I think we've really bastardized that term. You know, when you look at a newspaper, a lot of people call those stories. They're not stories, they're reports. And there is a very distinct difference between that arc plot and a report arc that I want to talk about. But the other part about it is that it's really exciting to me. As I've moved into education leadership and education training and workshops and those sorts of things with educators K through 20, this is a framework that I recommend for the semester, for a week, for a single class or topic area. This really is something that if you can set up this arc plot in a way that it feeds whatever it is you're talking about to your students, it will give you their attention. It will help motivate them. It will help them connect to things they wouldn't connect with otherwise. So we're really going to try to unpack narrative in its holistic form and talk about how we can use it in the classroom. And it will obviously have some nice ramifications in just sort of life. You'll become a good storyteller at a party. But I'm going to talk about what a real story is and what a story is not, and then how we can leverage those tools in the classroom.
That sounds great. I would like you to do that now so I can so I can have a better lesson for tomorrow. But that sounds great. Very interesting. So I just have one more question, Jeff. And you talk about storytelling and engagement, and I think there is, and especially when this pandemic started, there was this perception that online teaching is online teaching, and that the engagement piece naturally would be a lot lower, and students would not find the same engagement. My question is, for an educator, an adult educator or otherwise, how can we engage students online? What sort of tools or strategies? I know it's a broad question, but from your experience, what tools or strategies can we use to engage our students online?
I think it's one of the most valuable questions we can ask, especially right now at this moment in time. I have had conversations with 4 superintendents in the US for districts here about this very question in the last 6 weeks. And I think the advice that I would give to anybody right now is be intentional. Now, when I say be intentional, what I really mean is we had a lot of people at the start of the quarantine situation really just do whatever they could think to do, or they found one thing that a colleague or a friend or a family member, sometimes I've literally heard teachers say, my child used this tool, so I tried it in my class. And, they had various results with those things. But it was really clear from the beginning, the people who had been doing truly online education for 20 plus years were shouting from the rooftops, please don't call what's going on right now online education if you're just having a Zoom class. It's not the same thing. And I agree with that. I think that that's a fair point to make. However, they also said you can't call a Zoom class or a Teams class or a Skype class online. And I disagree with that. I happened to watch back in 2014, just before I was the chief innovation officer at a university down in Florida. I had an opportunity to sit in on a class for an experimental university called Minerva. Minerva was actually architected, the learning experiences were architected by the head of psychology from Harvard. He came over, his name's Coslin, he came over and did basically set the stage for what those classes would look like. And they were synchronous. They were like a Zoom class. Now it was a proprietary system. I don't know who they used, but you saw the thumbnails of the students and you had a whiteboard. And on that whiteboard, they shared the space. Sometimes the teacher wrote on it, sometimes the students wrote on it, sometimes they both did. There was drawing. It was not simply a person lecturing to this group of thumbnails. And the professors were from all over the world. They were some of the brightest minds from Israel and India, and I mean, just all over the place. And these students, by the time those sessions were done, and like I said, I sat in on one that was about an hour and 10 minutes, the students were sweating. They were so engrossed and engaged and really challenged. And the teachers were calling them out and asking for questions. And then they were saying, okay, draw it down. Let's show me what you mean. Draw it here. Okay, somebody else help them draw this so that it makes more sense. And it was quick and it was fast paced. And that was augmented by what we really think of as online, which were asynchronous discussions, content people had to go and read prior to the class, or that was springboarded from the class. That said, okay, you don't understand this yet, no problem. We haven't talked about it. Here's the content. Here are the assets you need. My videos or expert videos or TED Talks or stuff in a textbook or whatever it might be. And those students were highly engaged. So what I really liked about that experience was the intentionality of all of it. When it was synchronous, it was highly and intentionally synchronous. And they used annotations on the screen, and they used whiteboards, and they used chat, and they used all the tools. When it was asynchronous, it was intentionally asynchronous. It wasn't just, well, let me give this a shot and see what happens. They were really going out of their way to create constructivistic, problem-based, generative learning experiences through their conversations. It then led to what they would do synchronously or asynchronously in terms of content. And I think if we can get to a place where we do that, we won't be surprised by these experiences when we say, okay, I get it. I know I have to pivot. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pivot intentionally. When it's synchronous, I'm going to learn the tools, the basic tools. You don't have to go out and get 50 or 60 other tools, just the basics. And then when it's asynchronous, same thing. I'm going to understand what the basic tools are. I'm going to lean into them. And I think your students will really appreciate it. Then you can add more stuff in over time, and it's quite effective.
Yeah. No, that sounds, what you described there sounds amazing. Getting that level of engagement, and again, that sort of online piece and intentionality, I think is a big piece as we have transitioned to this type of learning. So that's great. And again, thank you for your time this afternoon. I know you're a couple hours ahead, I think, in Colorado, right? Yeah. So thank you again. So once again, Dr. Jeff Borden will be speaking at our upcoming Adult-Centered Education Conference online, Microsoft Teams, and that is happening on Friday, May 21st. So thank you again, Dr. Borden, and we look forward to hearing you.
I'm looking forward to it. I'll see you guys there.
Thank you.